In this episode, we are on day 5. I am counting the days of actual work taking place as opposed to consecutive days. So today we're going to see the blocks being laid, the foundation damp-proof layer being laid. Quick preview of what's coming up today. You'll see the bricks are going to be laid. We've got engineering bricks and blocks which are going to go into the foundations that have been dug, and that's going to give you an idea of the process of laying the bricks for your own small UK extension in a small city garden. This was a cold day, so what happens is the cement was laid. We had 2 days worth of break, so because it was so cold they couldn't work in the cold. So sometimes when builders say that, there is actually a reason behind it. So the cement or sand may be frozen, so it can't be mixed up as well, and it's got more things to go wrong. So what you'll see today is this is a view of the day they will be coming in, which is counting day 5 of actual work commencing for this small city garden extension. Remember, if you watch the first few episodes, I'm going through this extension process. It's about 3 meters by 6.5 meters, roughly speaking. There's more precise measurements there, but you'll see they laid the foundations with the wheelbarrows of premix that came through from the concrete mix truck, and that was after day 1. It was solid. It would have been workable, but leaving it for 2 days made it even more solid. Now, what I mean by this is, if you notice here, see how cold it is? The sand's just turned into clumps, so that's why it wouldn't mix as well. You can tell now that the foundations are solid. You can hear that when tapping it with a piece of wood. So we are more or less ready now for the layer of coarse bricks. So we're going to have blocks on the bottom, which brings it up to damp proof, and the workers were here, brought in their shovels and things to get this ready. So you're kind of seeing this as things progress. So I always have a time lapse in the corner, and then I use my mobile phone to take close-ups. So they're making sure that the boundary lines are marked up and we're within the rules, so we don't obviously go wider than our garden. We left a little bit of space there and kept the wall inside our garden. That way we definitely know that we're within our legal limit. So what they did is they laid blocks around and measured around just to make sure that the final wall will be as spec, because the architect gives you measurements that you need to stick to, and they're using cement and sand to make the mix for this. So they call this lots of different things. They call it muck, they call it mix, masala, mal, all sorts of stuff depending on who the builders are. So you'll see here now they're just laying out where the corner bricks need to go, so they can put a plumb line to use for their building. So they've got water in this mixing crate, and they're going to be mixing that down to make it a consistency, and they use fairy as like a plasticizer. Is it plasticizer? Is that the right word? But yeah, they normally you can use fancy stuff, but they use fairy, which kind of works in a similar fashion. So you'll see here now they're just clearing up the middle section where we've got like that platform. They've marked where the walls would need to go. If you remember the plans from our first few episodes and I spoke through what's going on, you should be able to keep an eye on this. So it's going to be a studio room, a utility room. We're still deciding yet, but I'm thinking of an office type environment. So when you get to a few more later episodes, you'll see this. And if you haven't already caught up, you should catch up on the first few, because I explained what's going on and how we got to this stage. And again, in the resources section, like in the description, you'll see a link to a document article where I'm actually putting additional information to help you. So if you're going through this process, things like the questions you should ask the builders, what architects to use, how long this can take, how much it costs, all these things are going to be broken down in a proper article, so you can use that as like a resource. Again, prices can change as time changes, so don't use it as a strong guide, but it'll give you an idea of the best practices just so you get like a decent overall process. So you can see here they laid the corner block down, and that's going to be the end block, and they put that in each corner, and they're going to use plumb lines, which basically a thread. They put one thread from one block to the other block, and that lets them basically go in a straight line and make sure they're sticking to the specs, like the measurements. You can see that yellow line there. And overall it was an okay day. The weather was nice. It was about it was cold. We are in January, remember, so it is still cold. But as these episodes progress, if you're going in summer, it's going to be very hard to find builders to work throughout like summer, because they're going to be all chock-a-block busy. So getting them just before the season starts, if they're willing to work in like adverse conditions, because it is kind of cold, then you've got decent builders. Overall, you need to keep an eye on them. Basically, no matter how good the builder is, it's always good to keep an eye on what's going on, where things are progressing, what's going on. And each day in the morning we'll be like, okay, so what's the plan today, what we're doing. And when they're talking about walls, I'll mention things like, okay, do you remember that the door's going here, inside we're going to have a partition wall here. Maybe we'll have a utility room, so there might be a sink there. So do you need to know that for the work you're doing today? And just reminding them of little things like that, as well as like the spacing and things, like what kind of spacing you want. It's always good to have that in mind. And if you leave it too late, sometimes they may have built past a point, so they'll have to do more work to go backwards. So you rather tell them a few steps in advance. Like for example, when they were here, I said to them, do you know that the door's going to go 2 meters away from the bottom wall, and etc, etc. And then they said, okay, yeah, we'll make sure we adjust for that when we're doing the wall, so we know the spacing. They were mixing muck as they were going along, so cement and sand in their wheelbarrow. And you'll see they make light work of this. The bottom wall went down quite quickly. Within like 2 hours, the lower section all the way around was done. Main thing here is going to like a good layer of foundation down. So because the foundation cement is dried, they put a nice layer of thick muck, which is basically like the mix of concrete and sand, and they started laying the blocks. And it's like a consistency of, like, you know when you make cakes and you put the icing on the cake, the thick stuff, like is it called icing? It's not called icing, is it? But yeah, I also liked how they break their blocks. These blocks are concrete. You basically get a chisel and you hammer through these, and you go all the way around, you mark it, and it gives you a precise cut. So little things like this are handy to see if you're thinking about doing this yourself. It is back breaking work because it's all heavy blocks and things, so where possible, try and get builders. And if you're planning this yourself, maybe consider, if you're quite handy, get certain elements of the work done by builders, and the remaining bits that you want to do, you can do yourself. Just consider it and check what your pricing is, obviously your budget and how much you want to spend, and what kind of time frame you've got, because obviously the builders are working at a lot faster speed than what I would, because they're used to doing this day in, day out. Overall, in terms of builders, there's 2 builders at any one time. One's mixing the stuff, one's laying the bricks, and sometimes there was 3 builders there. Remember this in the costings section, so at some point I'm going to make a video episode breaking down the entire cost of everything. So keep in mind how many people were working there, how many hours they spent there. The minimum wage is about just over £10. So if you're paying someone, if they're working 8 hours a day and you pay minimum wage, that's 80 quid already for one person. And if they're going to spend at least 4 or 8 weeks making the whole entire process, then at least you've got a gauge of what kind of pricing that could be considered for a job. So it's like common sense kind of things. But again, if you get a price for the entire build, that you'll get a better price if you explain what you need doing, all the equipment that's going to be used, making sure that you've got the right type of equipment to pass the inspections by the inspector. Also, I learned during this that the architect I've got, he is the actual inspector as well. So he's like allocated to come and check the phases of the build. So remember when we did the foundation holes, I thought someone from the council would come and check it because we did an application to the council, but that wasn't really the case. Someone from the inspector didn't actually come. Who came was my architect. So the architect who drew up all the plans is who came to check the foundations, and he said, yeah, okay, they're correct. He walked around and looked at them, and then he said, now you can pour the cement. That was like a couple of days ago when we cemented it. And once he's been, now this is the point. After that, when he's approved it, that we're building these damp walls. So what will happen now is they'll build these walls, the bottom, brick and engineering bricks. Reason the front side where he's currently bricking are engineering bricks. I'll explain in a second. But yeah, so the inspector came and he had a look and he said, fine. So now what you need to do is let me know once you've got to damp proof level, which is basically these 2 blocks with some damp proof membrane, which is basically like a plastic sheet, thin, long sheet that goes on top of the bricks. And the middle section where the platform is, where I'm standing here, that will all be dug out, and there'll be insulation and cement in there to make it damp proof. So after that bit is when the inspector comes again. So the reason on this side we have engineering bricks is that floor level is slightly higher, not this side, the side behind me where he's currently doing it. So that wall, that ground will actually be sloped down and it'll be lower, which means you'll see some of these engineering bricks. So that's why they used engineering bricks, because they'll show. So they don't want there to be blocks. They wanted it to be engineering bricks so it looks a bit nicer. So little things like this, you'll be able to tell if the builders know what they're talking about when they give you like little tips where they're doing things specifically for a certain reason going forward. And again, with builders, it's just a case of giving them leeway, expecting certain things to be done to standard, as well as obviously if it starts raining or something's changed or the bricks are more expensive and the prices change, you need to get to a point where you know what things are costing, how much they're coming in at. And that's where the resources section I mentioned in the description will help you, because you can go and look at my article where I break down all the things that you should be asking builders before you get to this point. because that way you'll be able to cover the basics. You know how much you're paying, and if things change or it takes too long for the build process to start and things end up costing a little bit more, at least you can find out, okay, when we gave you a quote, the bricks were, I don't know, £1 each, but now because it's taken you 2 months to get approval, they're actually £1.30 each. So if you're using a 3,000 bricks, 30 pence, times 3,000, so you're paying a little bit more extra now because of that. So there's little things like that you need to consider. So you'll see here they're mixing the cement, putting it on each of those bricks, and then laying out the bricks, which is always interesting to see. It's like a smooth process, and the walls are nice and plumb, and they look perfectly fine to me. One thing you will have is there's always builders do this in their own particular way. So everybody has their own routine, the way they do this. So there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever the builder is used to and is experienced with is how he will do it. You'll always get other builders or brickies telling you to do it specific ways or different ways, but each to their own. As long as the wall is built in regulations and it's the right is plumb and is right depth and measurements, then you're perfectly fine. You'll see here that they had cement bags like they ordered. So there's about 8 cement bags, and there was like 5 big ton sand, which is building sand. So they were using those equipment to go through this process. And as things progress and the walls start building, I'm assuming more things will start coming. So those are the deliveries that will come through to you with all the equipment. So you'll see this is the lower section of the wall, and it progresses up to the further section. On the left hand side where you see the red brick is where the door will be to enter into this extension room, and it's detached from the house. So it's actually like an office room. When I say detached, I mean there's no internal entry from the house into this room. You'll have to come out and go into it. I wanted it separate to like the internal house entrance, so that way everything's there's more walls to use basically, and you don't have to go through the house to get into this. So there's little considerations which you would be at the architect stage and the planning stage. I'll also give you a link to an app that I found useful for like laying out internals of the extension. It's got like loads of little handy bits on there. It gives you an idea of where you can put things, and it's got measurements and things. So I'll put you that in the resources section. I'll need to put a note to remind myself to give you that. It's like an app which is free, by the way, so you don't have to pay for it. So it lets you play about with different settings and making sure you've got enough space for everything you want. So you'll see this is the end wall here, which would be the bottom of the extension, and it's all within like on a spec. The back there you'll see is double blocked because the ground level is higher anyway, so you won't see any of those blocks, which is why they use blocks and not engineering bricks. So they slowly progressed around and passed through the different stages of basically building it. How long can this take? Well, this was like a 3 to 7 meter 3 by 7 meter. So blocks, if you have good weather and they give it a good stint, I think in 8 hours you can get it done. If you've got 2 builders, one's making the muck, one's laying them down. If you got 3 builders, they probably do even better. But here, because they were between little bits, they had to dig out the extension foundations, and that was done. They started the blocking, and a day and a half went by where they fully did all the blocks. And there is also further sections to come, which will be the damp proof course. So I'm thinking about making the damp proof course a separate video, because this doesn't get too long. This is already about a 15-minute video. So I will be showing you more elements of this, but you can see that the blocks here, they're laying down the blocks. They're putting down a nice bed of mortar, muck, or whatever you want to call it these days. They call them all sorts of names, and laying the blocks individually into them, making their way down and laying both sides. So obviously that's made us a nice square section to be ready for use. And there's an internal wall coming in. So remember, when you're making your extension, you're going to lose quite a little bit of space, because you've got your outside wall, you're going to have insulation in the middle. We're putting the cortex, no, not cortex, what's that stuff called, Cellutex, the block with the silver back. Not insulation, is like a block foam type thing. That's going to go in the gap in the middle of the wall. It'll be 50 mil, and there'll be 50 mil airspace. Max has come to give us a quick inspection, and you'll see that this was after day 1. So they did like a day and a half. So this is day 1. I took Max for a walk in the morning, and this is day 2 now. So this is day 2 where they continued to build out the internal wall to finish that off. And then this day they also did the damp proofing, as well as taking out the middle, the platform where the cement mixer is. All of that needs to come out where the slabs are, so that's going to come out as well. So you'll see here there's the remaining blocks we've got left over, which they had 2 pallets of blocks, but they used those on the second layer. So maybe we're left with like 16 blocks, which are going to be used up anyway. But there was a multitude of different settings and setups how they did it. But you can see the double wall coming in, so we're losing more or less nearly a foot now, because you've got 150 mil, 100 mil, say 300 mil is each wall. That's 600 mil. That's nearly What's that? So that's 500 millimeter. That's half a meter, kind of, more or less. You're losing half a meter with both walls, so your room's going to be a little bit smaller. And there are new regulations coming in that they want to make the gap even bigger, so keep that in mind. But don't worry, next up we're going to be putting in the actual damp proof plastic, so you'll be seeing that in the next episode. So make sure, if you're not subscribed already, subscribe. You'll see how amazing this is. They put like actual damp proof plastic down to stop moisture coming up from the ground into your walls, which stops like things like moss and stuff growing on your walls and fungus and all that stuff where you see patches. But you'll see that on the next episode, so hopefully click on the video and you'll see the next one here. See you on the next one.